But the further we take ourselves away from that, the worse everything becomes. And, you can look in awe at ruined cities all around the world. And that to me is a warning. This is what happens when you drift away from a sort of a human, what a human being actually is. It was at a point where quite regularly, if I laid flat at night, the full contents of my stomach would run back up, fill the nasal cavity, everything, and I would just wake up actually drowning in vomit, like choking and drowning. I couldn't breathe.
How how did you find Carnivore?
Well, I've heard a lot of your interviews, and a lot of people give a two-part answer, so I'm going to do exactly the same. So, first up, the executive summary would be, like many other people, a great fan of Jordan Peterson. And I recall seeing his very first interview on Joe Rogan, and he talked about the carnivore diet, and that sort of put a little spark in the mind of this is kind of interesting. And like so many other people have said as well, YouTube wants to keep your eyes on the screen, so the algorithms threw up Sean Baker, and I distinctly remember him talking about on Joe Rogan as well. He was talking about a bodybuilder in the 1950s stroke 60s. I can't recall his name. I should have had it written down, but he advocated only eating steak and eggs. So that's where the little spark came. And then the next video that I saw, which just sort of totally blew my mind, was a Ivor Cummings video, where he was talking about a doctor in the 1960s who came up with the hypothesis that everybody that has ever had a heart attack was either a diabetic or an undiagnosed diabetic. That was like a huge sort of penny drop, and it's just like, oh my god. Then from there, basically, I saw those 3 or 4 videos in about a 3-week sort of span. So that's going back about 5.5 years ago. And like most things in life, I just, that was enough for me. And I just went, yep, that's it. I'm going to start eating a carnivorous diet. I didn't have any I didn't understand the sort of biochemistry. I didn't understand what it was going to do. And when I give you the longer sort of run up, then people might understand why I jumped in quite quickly. So that's what I did. I just jumped in, just started eating steak and eggs, and basically I've been more or less doing that for almost sort of 5.5, and it'll be 6 years in August that I started. So the longer run up to it would probably start, I would imagine, probably in my early 40s, just for want of a better word, hit a metabolic wall, and then all of a sudden just started putting on weight. Didn't really do terribly much with my diet, but what I did do back then, most of my sort of teenage life, adult life, drank way too much alcohol. So I just thought, well, look, stop drinking alcohol, too much beer. This is probably, adding to the weight. That's what I thought back then. So that's what I did. I actually got hypnotized for that, and it worked fantastic. So I haven't had any alcohol for about 7.5 years. Not a drop, which was a fantastic sort of outcome from that. But the thing was, 6 months went by after no drinking, and nothing happened with my weight. So it was then I started thinking, I'm going to have to do something different. Sort of think about maybe diet and exercise a little bit more. Up until that point, I've always been, quite strong and fit and healthy and all the rest of it, but just hitting that metabolic wall, like we all sort of seem to do, started having its toll. So from some other things that were going on as well, so I gave up the alcohol, and part of the reason for giving up the alcohol, not for all of the obvious reasons, was I had the most horrific acid reflux. Um, it was at a point where quite regularly, if I laid flat at night, the full contents of my stomach would run back up, fill the nasal cavity, everything, and I would just wake up actually drowning in vomit, like choking and drowning. I couldn't breathe. It didn't happen a lot, but it was certainly happening sort of maybe once or twice a month. I've for years been on medication for it. Apparently, I have an incompetent sphincter, which sounds like sounds like an interesting thing. But just
I've
again,
worked
just
with a few of I've worked with a few of the
yeah, there's plenty of them around. um, so had the terrible reflux, and that was the thing. Now, so a little bit before starting Carnivore, I'd been for yet another endoscopy because my doctor had said I was getting, it was probably been going on for so long, I was getting to the stage where I would probably end up eroding the bottom of my sarcophagus. You know what I mean? And anyway, they would have to, this sounded horrific. They said, if it keeps going, we're going to have to cut a piece out and then rejoin because you're going to erode all that away. And it's just like, oh, I need to find something other than this. And which was probably a pretty good kick up the butt. Is I had an endoscopy, and they looked down and they were looking for all the rest of it. And when I came to, the doctors basically in quite a flippant way just looked me up and down in disgust and said, if you just reduce your body mass index, I'm sure that's going to go to some way to helping. So this was going on. Then a couple of other things that sort of pushed me along was I had an uncle, probably in his early 70s. He went out to cut the grass one day and just collapsed and died of a heart attack. Very shortly after that, my father had a heart attack. He survived, and so he was okay. Um, but when they actually did scans on my father, and they said, "No, this is probably the second." So he'd already had a heart attack at some stage and never knew about it, which is kind of strange. But so I'm sitting there at with terrible acid reflux, probably around about 100 kilos, there or thereabouts, maybe a little bit more. I'm not too sure. Feeling not very happy with everything in life, and just thinking, like, if this is the projection of what I'm looking forward to, this is no good. This is no good. So all of that was going on, and then I saw those progression of videos that I started, and like I said, and then I've carried it on for nearly 5.5 years. Um, so I'll probably talk about my transition into fat adaptation, if that's okay. So it was it was it was easy, or it seemed incredibly easy because I felt like I didn't have any really bad carbohydrate withdrawals, addiction issues, or anything like that. I just seemed to slip straight in. Second week, though, I had terrible diarrhea that lasted for about 5 days. My memory serves me, about 5 days. Terrible diarrhea. Um, when all of this is going on, I was watching binge watching more and more videos. Like everybody, I think Ken Berry was still into keto back then. I don't think it probably was, but I was watching Ken Berry. I was watching just all of the, quite a few of the usuals. And then I started to understand, okay, this could be just part of it. Keto, watch out for keto flu. So I had the bad diarrhea, and I just thought, okay, maybe it's just so much fat going into the system now, or maybe even the death of the entire microbiome. Who knows? Probably both, really. because I suppose the whole microbiome has to change from carbohydrate, not burning, but carbohydrate using to fat using sort of microbiome. Um, then after that period, just came through the other side. What I was eating back then is, again, I didn't really know what to do or anything. I just jumped straight in, which I think is the best way to do it, probably. So what I did was I just bought what they call sizzle steaks. So they're just about 10 mil thick ribeyes, cut 10 mil thick, because I just thought, right, it's going to be quick, especially because I didn't have a lot of time in the mornings. So I would just cook 2 sizzle steaks, 2 eggs in the morning. I would take a tin of sardines or fish or salmon, always in spring water, for lunchtime. And then I just had 2 sizzle steaks and 2 eggs in the afternoon. And I sort of did that religiously for three months. Eventually, after a few weeks, that middle period of lunches just disappeared. It was no longer needed, and it was just in the morning and in the afternoon. And I did that for 3 months, and then within, I'd like to think, in a month or two, the acid reflux was gone. And then I went on this fantastic trajectory of weight loss, and I lost 13 kilos. So I went down from about 100 to 87 kilos without really doing any exercise or anything. Lost a lot of water weight. I can remember going to the toilet and peeing an incredible amount in the first sort of 2 to 3 weeks, which some people go, oh, you're just losing water weight. Well, maybe it's not just water weight. Maybe it's inflammation. So did that, lost all that weight. And look, in the beginning, that's all I was looking for, was reducing my body mass index and seeing if it would help with the reflux. Well, it did help with the reflux, but I've later found out that it probably wasn't just a weight issue, but it was probably that I didn't have enough acid in it rather than not enough. And what the doctors do, they continually bombard you with drugs and things to reduce the acid. But anyway, that resolved itself. Then I would say that from a fat adaptation point of view, it felt absolutely fantastic after about sort of a month and a half to 2 months. But it wasn't, I would say it wasn't until the 3-month mark that I thought to myself, oh my God, this is it. This is it. I'd gone to bed one day, woke up, become fat adapted, and left the matrix. It was really sort of a profound feeling. And then I noticed that, and I've got a little list here which I'll sort of glance at periodically. I noticed a whole lot of other things. I noticed for the first time in my entire life I could breathe properly, because I've always had a sort of a low grade sort of post nasal drip and something going on. Then I noticed I can actually breathe properly, which was it was amazing. Then you start to notice little by little things like my joints don't hurt anymore. So I'm 50, I'm 52. I'm coming 53 in June, and I always had a little bit of pain in my right knee. That went in that sort of time frame. Other things, mood definitely lifted. I can remember my children saying, "You seem to laugh a lot more," which was a great thing to hear. Very positive. But I have dyslexia. Okay, so it can sort of, or has led to a lot of anxiety, possibly depression. I don't like to use that term terribly much. Um, has it cured it? Well, I'm never going to claim that something would cure anything, but life is a lot easier to deal with. And I've often heard people talk about the zero carb Zen, which everybody just feels a sort of at peace with the world. sounds kind of crazy. My mother, who she eats predominantly a carnivore diet now as well, she said I feel like I have poise.
Could I just explore the dyslexia anxiety thing a little bit more? So you, when you say you kind of you feel like you've got that carnivore zen and whatever, that's more that's kind of in relation to the anxiety
Yes.
dissipating. Like
So,
have you noticed anything with dyslexia as well, or?
oh no, I think that's a mechanical structural sort of problem.
Mm.
Um, I don't think that it could do anything, but just altering the mood around it has been a revelation. Just feeling, because all the it's hard to sort of describe being dyslexic, but I sort of interpret the world probably in quite a different way, maybe more in fast moving pictures rather than some other ways that people. I can't really describe it, but there's always an anxious feeling of I'm going to be caught out as somebody that's not basically a reader and a writer in this world. The school system really sort of beats you down for being that way. Um, so always had sort of some degree of sort of social anxiety. I'm not saying it's totally gone, but it's a hell of a lot easier to deal with. But my opinion on anxiety, and I don't want to seem like I'm diminishing it for anybody that suffers anxiety, but really, if you take away the ups and downs of sugar throughout the day, and you're just sort of on a very even energy keel, you're just totally even. Well, you do feel a lot more at peace with the world. You do sort of, you know, and then you start to add things. If you never really feel hungry, or got the carbohydrate jitters, right? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Where's my next fix of carbs going to come from? If you take that out of the equation, then you know it seems like a natural process. Of course, anxiety is going to drop to a point where it's very easy to deal with. It's the same with in a way for me as well. And again, I don't want to diminish anybody who suffers from depression or anything like that. But if you make yourself into the most robust version of yourself, where it doesn't matter if I eat today, I can just eat tomorrow. If you make yourself robust and you give up a drug, which carbohydrates are a complete and utter drug, and they should be viewed as such. Which is it's a really interesting concept, because you try to describe to somebody you're addicted to food, and they go, food is an absolute necessity, but it's what food you eat is what you're addicted to. If you were addicted to cocaine or heroin or something, a class A drug, you sort of have a life before that drug, alcohol, but you have a life before it, and you have memories of a life before it. So you sort of always have it in your mind. Your addiction might lead you to believe that you require that for life, because that's what addiction sort of does to you. But you sort of understand that I don't need it. But it's very hard to talk to people about carbohydrate addiction, because they actually, well, how can I be addicted to food if I don't have what I die? So I think with depression and stuff, if you become the best version of yourself and give up addictions and become sort of fit, strong, which this diet lends itself to. You have even energy. But you become robust, and you almost get in a funny way. You get an insight to what our ancestors must have just took for granted, you know. And I suppose we have being carnivorous. I always think I have a baseline of sickness, which I still remember, and now I have a higher baseline, and that's why I can't go back. I cannot and will not. I cannot go back. So great mood sort of changes. And look, I actually wholeheartedly believe that I'm a different human being now. I operate on a different operating system to 90% of the 99%, I don't know, 99% of the population. I have more in common with a 1-year-old baby, because we both cycle in and out of ketosis, than I do virtually anybody else. And it is quite I wouldn't say a scary feeling, but when you sort of, I find myself just sort of drifting like a ghost through crowds of people, knowing that I'm very different. And that might sound a little bit crazy, but I, I sort of can't help but feel that sometimes. Yeah.
Uh, I can understand that feeling, like just generally when you are eating this way, you kind of, I think that it's part of the carnivore zen.
Yeah.
It's kind of that carnivore calm. It's kind of like, okay, everything's okay. And, I've described it like in the workplace. I felt like once I was fat adapted and I was well into carnivore, I got out of the normal kind of the scrum of the normal workday,
Mm.
and it's kind of like things didn't bother me as much anymore.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
guess that's kind of that same thing as like floating along, you know.
Yeah. You just sort
Yeah.
of float along, and you sort of realize that the whole world's very different. One other interesting thing, when I first, so right at the beginning of starting Carnivore, um, there was a little bit of worry about cholesterol and all of these things, and because I had an uncle and my father having a heart attack, I went out and had a coronary calcium heart scan. Luckily for me, I came back at zero. Um, I went and I repeated that at year 3. So after eating a high fat carnivorous diet. So just to just to sort of give you an idea of the first 3 years. First 3 years, I was an absolute zealot. COVID sort of, and we'll talk about what happened in the pandemic, but it doesn't involve carbohydrates. But well, many. But so for the first 3 years, so like I said, after about 3 months, went, oh my god, this is it. I sort of drifted to just one meal a day, which would be just one large steak, usually rump, ribeye, or picanha, or the rump cap, which has a very thick cap of fat on it. So I would only eat, that would be my only meal. But I also introduced by about that time a bulletproof coffee in the morning, um, with just a little bit of milk, um, lots of butter, and MTC oil. And I can remember that for the first week of drinking a bulletproof coffee in the morning, so I'd actually upped the fat, just getting these unbelievable feelings of euphoria. Um, from just increasing the fat. I was almost skipping down the road, just happy. Um, I don't really get those feelings terribly much anymore, because once you've done like 6 years, 5.5, coming 6 years, it's a fairly long time, and you just sort of slip into grooves, and you just feel generally pretty good, and
I
just
think it's
before.
like everything. I think it's like
Yeah.
everything. You kind of just get used to it. It's
Mm.
like that's normal life now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But you get used to it, and it is normal life. But any sort of Kate talks about transgressions, any transgressions, and my goodness, it'll come back and kill you. But in a way, that is a good thing, because you sort of, and it's I suppose I think that happens with a lot of addiction is you sort of dare yourself. You know? I'm sure you could do that. I dare you. And all it would take is like, if I ate one piece of bread, I'd feel dreadful within about sort of an hour. That night, I would have terrible reflux again, bloating, my stomach would churn, and I would feel very, 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 very sorry for myself, like I'd poisoned myself. But in a way, that's what the carnivore diet, yes, you could call it an elimination diet. But how do you know when you're just eating like the normal diet, you're just bombarded with so much rubbish, so many plant toxins, so much blood sugars doing this. Um, you're getting sandpapered to death without realizing it. How do you tune into anything and sort of take some of those cues that I'm sure we're animals? I'm sure we have positive feedbacks and negative feedbacks from things. You can't, you just seem to not be able to do that. So when you go on like the big elimination and just take everything out and only feed your body um, exactly what it needs, almost in the exact proportions that it needs, and everything just starts, running absolutely beautifully, then you add something back in, and it gives you basically a warning. I can eat a little bit of white rice, and I've done that here and there on occasions, like sharing meals, because meals and things can be quite important things. You can't just be a monk and just live in your room with a frying pan and only eat steak and bacon and things. You've got to have some of the traditions and things of family and stuff. You've got to follow some of those. But look, for me, looking back, being on the sad diet, the ordinary diet, um, like in the words of Radiohead, it's like being a detuned radio, buzzing like a freight, like a detuned radio. And then when you become fat adapted, all of a sudden, it clicks in, and it's a perfectly beautiful signal, sound, everything's great. But my go-to now is, if I fart a lot, if I get reflux, I've eaten the wrong thing, and that's basically everything other than. Some people might argue and say, "Oh, you put yourself into a hypersensitive state." Good, good. If if I put myself into a hypersensitive state by eating this diet, do you know what? Well, I want to be in this hypersensitive state, and and that's the interesting thing. A lot of people think that the carnivore diet is extremely, extremely radical. I actually view it the exact opposite. It's the most conservative diet that you can be on. And, you know, once you, obviously for me, once you sort of reach 40, you're starting to be in a broken state, and carnivore fixes it. Meat heals. It's fixed it. Sleep is another thing that a lot of people talk about, and it has totally changed. Now, I'm not saying it's changed for the better, because I basically close my eyes, fall asleep, and then wake up again in almost a set period of time, and that is just absolutely solid. But the problem is I get very tired, and I actually think that the circadian rhythms and just everything works. You are a different human being. Um, and I basically just I've absolutely like head nod falling asleep by about 8:30 at night, and then I usually wake up sometime just around 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's me wide awake for the entire day, and then back, and I have enough energy and I feel fine. I don't particularly feel tired through the day. I can remember being pre-carnivore and 100 kilos driving around and having those huge sugar crashes in the afternoon. And I was actually felt like I was a danger driving because, you'd just be like, oh God, I'm so tired. And there would be times where you just feel like pulling up and having a nap. You were so wrecked. Well, just nice, beautiful, even sort of energy and everything. So look, I'm not going to say it's got better because it would be nice to sleep in a bit. But maybe it's because I get up and I'm always bathed in the lovely blue light of morning, which probably triggers things 14 hours later to sort of it's bedtime now. But that's a signal to me that like the system is probably working very well. Where we are to some extent, we can't get away from it. We have a biological heritage. Maybe 10,000 years ago, we threw a spanner in the works by going into agriculture. Societies grew for good or bad around that. I suppose religions grew as well, because in many ways that has led to a loss of freedom that I believe that we probably had as hunter gatherers, because the further we seem to take ourselves away from an authentic, and I'm not saying I know what an authentic human experience is, but the further we take ourselves away from that, the worse everything becomes. And, you can look in awe at ruined cities all around the world, and that to me is a warning. This is what happens when you drift away from a sort of a human what a human being actually is. Um, our biological heritage hasn't caught up with the progressiveness of sort of modernity and everything. We've shot way past that. It's like they found is it Gaba Tepe is like a whole city that's buried, and they're just like, oh my God, this is like. Well, maybe a bunch of people got together and said, "Nah, you know what? This living and eating carbs and this living, I'd rather go out and be a hunter gatherer again." So we buried it. No, we don't want. And it's happening. It's happening again. They want to build a. Sorry if I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but they want to build this mega city that takes up virtually the whole of Holland with 80 million people in it. The Saudi Arabians want to build this city called the Line, which is going to be like 100 kilometers long. It's so many high and so many wide with mirrored sides. And you just think, what's that? What is a human being in relation to living like that? It's just like doing that to your peril. And I suppose, future generations will be going, look, these people tried to build this line and now it's a ruin. And what happened? Just like, well, maybe the people just got sick and they relied on everything being brought to them, and it collapsed just like every other city perhaps in history. But again, it's just that moving away, and I think diet is one of the biggest ways, obviously, that to bring it back to what we're talking about today is that's probably one of the biggest things that we have drifted away from is food, what we should eat. And again, that sort of takes us back to how you can have that intense feeling of being a different human being now, because you're running on a totally different operating system, possibly the correct one. No certainties, only probabilities, but definitely possibly the best one. So that I think was some of the biggest changes. Not huge like autoimmune diseases fixed or anything like that, but huge in the sense that I was obviously had a broken digestive system because of the acid reflux, and put just stacking on weight and hitting about 100 kilos, and just feeling absolutely dreadful. And the carnivore diet has fixed all of that, but more importantly, it has stopped that disease progression. I never had it diagnosed, but I would be very, I would be confident that I would be pre-diabetic, um, in that state that I was. So all of that is gone, and more importantly, I can see a sort of a clear line to 100 years. That's what I'd
Mm.
like to do. Uh,
No,
so
nice. Um, so, well, first, congratulations on your upcoming 6-year anniversary and also on so many things having improved. Um, I regarding you told me your mother is now carnivore.
yeah.
I'm interested to know how this is working out with your mother and with the family generally, and how you've been because almost 6 years is a long time.
Hmm. So with my parents, after my father had a heart attack, my mother had quite an aggressive cancer, and then my father had prostate cancer. So I was sending them videos about insulin resistance in relation to cancer, and a whole lot of sort of ideas of things, and they both went keto, lost a lot of weight, and then they just naturally sort of drifted into being carnivore. I don't see them terribly much because I'm in Australia and they're back in the UK. But they love it. They, like I said, my mother says that she feels an unbelievable amount of poise, and she feels good. My father actually had one hip changed, um, prior to going carnivore, and then he used carnivore to lose quite a lot of weight, and his other hip was absolutely giving him like the most incredible pain. And then one day when I was speaking to him, he said, "Do you know that eating carnivore?" He said, "I can still feel the mechanics of it being all gritty and broken and just horrible." But he said the majority of the pain has gone, which is which is sort of just outstanding. And he's gone on and then had the hip replaced, and I believe that he's having a really, even at the he's probably in his just coming early 80s. I believe that his recovery and everything's been really, really good for a man of that age. Eating the proper diet. So that's good. The rest of my family here, they don't eat carnivore or even keto really. I think deep down they probably know that at some stage they might have to. I don't know. Um, but but they eat probably a little bit heavier meat now. They're not frightened of meat so much and cholesterol, which is good, and certainly no seed oils. And my 15-year-old son said to me one day, he said, "So sugar is a drug and the seed oil is a poison." And I just thought, if that's all that they take away from it, then that's good. And they probably know that it's, if they ever have any health issues, they probably, I'm just here as an example, hopefully, that they can look to and use and go, well, I know what to do. Early on, I did and talking about knowing what to do. Earlier on, I said that for the first sort of 3 years, I was quite a sort of very strict. Well, when COVID came along, I sort of like right at the very beginning, when it was just mayhem and nobody seemed to know what was happening. I I sort of thought to myself, what am I going to do? And then I thought, well, I think that probably going into deep ketosis with any illness is probably going to be a really good sort of strategy. And I thought, if I end up going to hospital, where I'm not going to eat their bloody food, so I thought I'll probably just fast. So there you go. I'll be fasting and we'll go into ketosis, deep ketosis and see what that does. But at the time, so I was down about the 86, 87 kilos. I'd just sort of maintained that for whatever the time scale was, 3 years or something, until COVID came along. So I thought, right, how am I going to put on weight? So I thought, yeah, heavy cream, that'll do. So I got stuck into a whole heap of heavy cream for a few months and started great. Started increasing me up into about 90 kilos. And I thought, right, that's me ready. Then nothing really happened. And being in lockdown, I started drinking too much tea and coffee, which I always just have a tendency to put cream in, a spoonful of butter in it. And anyway, my weight went up to about 92 kilos. I didn't look terrible. It didn't look like I was sort of, but it slowly crept up because, you just get into a groove over the years. So I used to probably drinking too much coffee, lockdowns, and all the rest of it, taking on too much fat, too much energy, and put a bit of weight on. And then just a couple of months ago, I went to see my doctor. She likes to do blood tests regularly. I think because she probably thinks, oh God, he's on a carnivore diet. I have to do some due diligence to cover my ass. But she is sort of a low carb doctor, so that's all right. So I actually did a full body composition scan, and I was absolutely blown away that I was 30% body fat. But yeah, 30%. And I was just like, I look very sort of slender. There was a little bit of visceral fat there. So in a way, a warning to people. Yeah, you can get into a groove, but maybe cream isn't, maybe cream and dairy, for me anyway, but this is I laugh, and it's almost fun because everything is a N+1 experiment. And for me, I took all the plants, no fruit, no fiber, no plants, and ate meat for a set period of time. Then I introduced a lot of dairy, whereas before I was just having a bit. And my weight went up. If I overdo it, I do get a little bit of reflux, not terrible. So it is a warning sign. So now I'm probably I'm going to have to shake off the amount of dairy that I've been eating, drinking. But in a way, it's like, so if you're just on the standard sort of Western carbohydrate diet, it's very easy. No matter how full you are, you've always got room to drink some Coca-Cola or some sort of sweet drink, and you can always slip that in. And it's almost like the body can't really meter energy in a liquid form. And in a way, I think I may have sort of done that. So maybe I was masking some hunger signals by putting too much fat in to the system and a bit of cream, which, yeah, it does have a little bit of carbohydrate in. And maybe that was masking a little bit of hunger and just eating one meal a day. And in a way, maybe I was putting weight on because I was under eating because of drinking energy as well. So I've actually cut the cream out, not almost fully. Just it's very addictive and lovely, heavy cream. So I've cut it down by about 80%, and yes, I've in about a 2-week period, I've lost about maybe 2 to 3 kilos of weight. It's just dropped off. Is it weight or is it inflammation? Who knows? But anyway, I've dropped that little bit of weight off. So I suppose, like I said, it's kind of fun in a way, just one big experiment on ourselves. Um, and, and I've sort of drank probably too much drinking fat, so starting to cut that down. I'm toying with the idea of giving up coffee, but when that's the only thing, when that's the only thing that you sort of you do, difficult.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Difficult.
So at this point, you're still doing the 2 meals a day, and are those 2
I've
meals a day
just,
pretty
I've
much
just,
as you described?
yeah, I've just sort of started doing the 2 meals a day. So I still have a cup of coffee, but no cream, no dairy in it, just a little bit of MTC oil and butter. And so what I'm doing, because I'm reducing that sort of energy, I eat about maybe 3 or 4 boiled eggs every morning, and then just have my steak in the evening. So I've sort of gone back to 2 meals a day, because like I said, I think I was probably with the lockdown and sitting at home for long periods and things. I think I was probably under eating, because it's very easy actually to under eat on the carnivore diet. Very, very easy. Um, just the thing that's caught my eye, and I'm sorry, like I say, because I've got dyslexia, I need to sort of look at lists, and I can sort of jump backwards and forwards a bit. If I don't have a list, if I go to the shops without a list, it's usually 2 trips. Oh shit! But I can remember seeing a thing. Oh, it wouldn't be too long ago. People might find this interesting. Again, it's just an N+1. Maybe people won't. But anyway, I'll share it. I saw a thing on the Steak and Butter Girl channel, and they talk about priming. How when they get people to start, they really load them up on tons of food, because you're coming from the position of probably being kind of low in nutrients and things. Well, I didn't know anything about that, but I sort of ended up, when I tuned the radio in, I I sort of started doing that without sort of realizing. And what I did was I hated liver as a child. And then all of a sudden, because back back like 5.5, 6 years ago, there wasn't like a huge amount of channels. There was a few people kicking around, Paul Saladino and a few others, and everybody talked about nose to tail and everything. So I sort of thought, well, maybe I should probably eat a few organs, give it a go. And I did, because I didn't like it. Anyway, I found liver just hyper palatable, just like, oh my God. And I think again, it's this thing that you can sort of have positive feedback loops. Incidentally, people say to me, how can you just eat steak all the time? I said, well, you should try it. But the thing is, I'm hungry. I eat a steak. My body feels fantastic. I feel fantastic. Rinse and repeat. Oh, I'm hungry. I eat a steak. And your body tells you that's what you want to eat. So getting back to the liver, I found it hyper palatable. I started, eating it. It got rarer and rarer. I started cutting it up and eating it raw. I couldn't get enough of it, and I ate it and I ate it. Then all of a sudden, oh, I don't want this in. And I'm lucky. I'm lucky if I eat it sort of 3 times a year. And I think I got the taste for it, and my body went, "Oh, you need this. You need this." And I ate it and I ate it and I ate it, and like it got to the point where I was eating it raw, and just eat it, eat it, eat it, and then all of a sudden it's like, "No, you've got enough." And I again, when you if you're not on a diet that eliminates all the rubbish, can you even pick up on those signals? Probably not. You just wandering through life, and yeah, it's not good. It's not good. But anyway, like I said, so I almost probably I was low in a whole heap of sort of nutrients that my body was screaming for, and not knowing about priming or anything, or whether that's even a good thing. But filled up on liver to begin with. Interesting thing about the old N+1 sort of experiments on yourself is, I think that the whole world is absolutely sort of cursed with what you might call hyper individuality, and that really plays out in diet. Oh, I can do that, or for me, I've got to eat this, I've got to eat that. The vegans are great at sort of hyper individuality, and I did hear Dr. Chafee, not so long since, talking about, if this is the case, we're the only species that is like this. You know, a koala eats the leaves it eats. They all do it, and they're all well. Does that mean that everybody should eat a carnivore diet? Maybe, maybe not. But what I would say is forget about this hyper individuality. Eat a diet that doesn't cause hyperinsulinemia. Eat a diet that doesn't cause diabetes and all of the effects of metabolic illness, and you're probably well. And most people would end up eating some form of a ketogenic, carnivore, meat heavy diet to do those things. So I don't think that we're all as individual as we think. I think that's sort of a tool that is pushed on us to fractionalize us. We can all come together as a carnivore sort of community and go, yeah, we all eat meat. Yeah, there's some differences. It depends how broken you were coming into it. Some people need more fat. Some people need less. I think Stephenson in The Fat of the Land, the guy that went and lived with the Inuits, he said a balanced diet is protein and fat, which is that's the balance. Balance, the rainbow, eat the rainbow, the balanced diet. It's utter nonsense. One of the biggest takeaway. I'm sorry if you were just about to say something, but my biggest takeaway from everything that I've done and the huge amount of research is that it's actually quite simple. There are only three things in food. You've got fat, excluding vegetable oils, but you've got fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Protein isn't an energy unless you're starving and you start cannibalizing yourself. So you've only got fat and carbs. Carbs cause a problem, fat doesn't. So what should you eat? I think Amber O'Hearn said that we're actually not carnivores, we're lipivores. And I think most of us will probably be on 70-30, 70% fat, 30% sort of protein, or somewhere in and around there, I think. So that's very simple.
Yeah. And I mean, it certainly makes sense when you look at what's going on around us. People that are based on carbohydrate energy, they're not running marathons. They're not they're struggling to push their shopping trolley up the aisle. It's
exactly.
And nothing against them. It's just, but those are the facts, right? Basing your energy demands on carbohydrate and ultra processed food is not going to be good for you, or it's not good for you.
Yeah, that's right. And it plays into a lot of things, because if I wanted to be a tyrannical leader of the world, which I really don't, you would encourage the population to eat carbohydrates. Knowing what we all know now, you would go, let's make it a virtue, or even let's make it almost akin to a religion, not to eat animal protein or fat. And the consequences of that would be a more compliant world. And you would certainly feed the police force, the Stasi, the Praetorian Guard, whatever. You would give them all beef to eat. And you as the elites would all be sitting back and eating beef. And I sort of like in a crazy way, yeah, put a tinfoil hat on. In a crazy way, is that happening? It seems to be. You know, there is a war on meat. There's a war on the carnivore diet. There's definitely a nudge and a push towards plants and veganism, all of these things. And is food a mass control mechanism? Probably, probably, because again, the further you take us away from some sort of authentic human experience, the worse everything gets. And the worse everything gets, the more you bow to leaders, government, whatever, for help.
Oh. Mm.
And yeah, we're heading into interesting times. Interesting times with censorship and everything. It's quite important that we get this message out before it's lost, perhaps, so that ability is lost. Hopefully, it won't be, but I suppose we can never say no.
Just on that, just considering the message, might get lost. Someone might be watching this now that's thinking, okay, well, I wanna kind of get involved with this now. I want to get started with carnivore. How would you recommend someone get started to maximize their chances of success?
Um, I don't know. I would assess how broken I was in the beginning, and a bit of self reflection. Um, and I would certainly I would certainly consider what my relationship as an addiction to carbohydrates is. And from that, whether or not you could just slowly reduce the carbohydrates until you get to the point where you're not eating them anymore over a set period of time. Or if you're with a bit of self-reflection, if no, I can't do that because I'll just keep triggering me and going, then maybe you just have to rip the band-aid off and just jump straight in and do it. And just be aware that you're going to have an electrolyte issue. I got some electrolyte issues. It would sort of manifest itself with a strange headache that felt like it was on top of my head. Just a little bit of salt water and things would help that. Adding a little bit of extra salt. Be aware that you'll probably get diarrhea. Most people seem to, who just jump straight in. But apart from that, do it. I don't think that you'll ever look back, and the changes will manifest themselves in all sorts of different ways. I had no expectations going in other than I thought it might be a tool to lower my weight, and it did so. It's done so much else. And
Yeah.
binge watch these interviews.
Nice. Good, great advice. So, if people want to reach out to you, Matt, is there a way they can get in contact, like social media or anything like that?
No, not really, not really. I keep to myself. Just go out there, eat meat, be happy.
No worries. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I'm really happy to hear how much better you're doing, and also that, yeah, it's been 5.5 years, almost, coming up on 6 years now. So that's great. Thank you.
It's achievable. It's doable in the long term.